Everything Sequel is brought to you by Slater's 50/50 and the Vegas Beer Guys.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. You have been forewarned. Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is still the Die Hard edition. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. With me is my much better half, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello to the group, Tom.
I tried to find more Nixon.
So those of you that have seen Live Free or Die Hard, you know that Tom's talking about the movie montage created by our criminals, Timothy Olyphant, Thomas Gabriel. This is Live Free or Die Hard, a 2007 Len Wiseman film. The 16th highest grossing film of 2007, Tom. Budget of $110 million, made $134 in the U.S., but $388 worldwide.
Where it was called Die Hard 4.0.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's the success is something to do with the change of title.
There's a trend. Like with all these sequels, they make bank overseas. They make more money overseas than they do here in the U.S. They love the Die Hards.
I wonder whether it's just like, stupid Americans blowing stuff up. That's
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the I don't know why this particular franchise gets some. I guess there is something universal about blowing stuff up.
All countries love it.
I think so. Yeah.
Despite the U.S. is the only one that mentions like fucking rockets and bombs in its national anthem.
Yeah, in the same way that the silent movies had this global appeal because there was no dialogue. It's like we're talking through the language of blowing shit up.
Right. And boy, does this movie blow some shit up.
Oh, yes.
So, for those of you that listened to our introduction to the Die Hard movies, you know that we rank the movies, and Tom, he ranked the movies 2, 4, 3, 5. I ranked them 4, 3, 2, 5. But neither one of us, I think, did it with a lot of gusto, Tom. We find the only thing we're completely agreed on is that the fifth movie is last, and it's razor thin on these other three movies. I'm even in talking with you, I'm already starting to change my mind.
Yeah, likewise. I feel terrible about saying any bad things about these movies. I have like maybe one or two not very nice things to say about this movie. And,
Right.
I don't feel comfortable with even that level of criticism.
Right. So, like, the hard part for me was in my heart, like, after talking about it, I feel like I even want to change. Like, I kind of want to go 4, 2, 3. We talked in the previous episode about how much I like that they took a big swing in 3.
Yeah.
Talking about something as important as racism in this country as well. But
Well, no, but that's very justified. My big you can listen back, but my big problem with the film is the second half of the movie. But
Right.
it's an illusion that that just because all the most of the bad stuff is in that part of the movie, it makes it look like a worse movie, but it isn't necessarily.
Correct. And same with number 2. Like, start to finish, 2 is the most complete movie.
Definitely.
And that's what I like about it so much. It's just that it feels more retread. We talked about, the band is back together. They felt like they had to bring everybody back, sometimes in weak ways. It doesn't really work.
Mhm.
And it felt like a retread of the first movie. I think the reason I listed this movie as my favorite of the sequels is I think it's the most successful in basically from not from beginning to end, but from beginning to almost end.
Yes. I agree. I think I know exactly the scene you're talking about as well.
Yeah. So But up until that point, I think this movie is by far the best story, the best, it's the most interesting to me. It seems like we kind of talked in the previous episode, the one thing they do really well in this series is they move with the times well.
Absolutely.
And this
that's
movie
so
does that
key
really
here.
well.
I mean, if the past couple of sequels could not work post 9/11 and post internet connectivity.
Right.
And at least this movie, maybe, we'll talk about A Good Day to Die Hard, but certainly this movie cannot exist without internet connectivity and 9/11.
Yeah,
they come out of the gate swinging with a cyber attack on American democracy.
Correct. And it's front and center, right?
That is not only linked. That is not only evocative of 9/11. Is a direct historical result of everything that happened after 9/11.
Right.
So this movie really isn't pulling its punches when it comes to modernization.
And so let me ask you this: are you on the same page with me? In what we're talking about, I feel like this movie has the best justification for the villain. Sort of in the sense, like the villain has the best story. We talked about 3 has a good one, but it's familiar. The idea of a family member who wants revenge. 2, we can barely figure out why Colonel Stewart is doing what he's doing. This one is completely clear.
Yeah, the naked Tai Chi just distracts us from whatever that guy's motivation is.
Right. But in this one, it's completely clear, totally motivated, and in that way, I think it's the best of the 3, or rather 4 sequels.
Yeah, that's interesting because I absolutely do. I am on the same page as you, but I don't know if I always felt that way about Gabriel. And that's directly linked to how my opinion of Timothy Olyphant's changed. Where I remember when I saw this in 2007, all I'd seen Olyphant do was Deadwood, which is a phenomenal, as Sheriff Bullock, which is a phenomenal performance. But at the time, I just thought he was this cheesecake actor that, for some reason, was really good at playing this uptight guy, but actually wasn't very talented. He just lucked into this role, which was perfect for him.
Oh, I see.
And then when I saw Gabriel, I was like, oh, he's so awkward and so bland. And I remember at the time thinking, well, he's probably kind of my least favorite Die Hard villain. Flash forward to, I don't know, I've seen this film about 3 or 4 times since. Flash forward to today, I'm like, this kind of white male fragility is our real life villainy now. This man is Jared Kushner. He is Steve Mnuchin. He is that guy who is trying to make the COVID vaccine and charges people for AIDS medication. It's that guy. And now I just think, what a breath of fresh air Timothy Olyphant is, and he knows exactly what he's doing in playing this guy.
That's how I felt when I originally saw him, because I felt like he was getting the most out of what, and you might speak to this, what feels like written on the page, not much there as a villain.
Right, yeah.
But I felt like there was something underneath, and I've always been such a big fan of Timothy Olyphant. I just love his work.
Well, it was just I know you're a big fan of Justified as well. It was Justified that made me realize, oh, this guy can do anything.
Yeah, right.
It's
anything.
Just that
I was just going to say
he has a particular talent for these kind of buttoned down, uptight guys. I mean, in Justified, he's sometimes the opposite of that. So it was, and looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, it all makes sense now. Like it's one of the many kind of characters in this movie that have actually grown in credibility. It kind of as a 2020 movie still looks pretty good. I mean, 13 years.
Right.
A lot of what it's talking about is still very much with us, and a lot of what seemed kind of implausible at the time is now second nature to us.
Right, and I think that's one of the things I like about this movie too, is that we are 13 years later and we could wait another decade, and I feel like when you watch it, it'll feel like it was made recently.
Yes.
Die Hard 2, even though it's made in released in 1990, it feels like an 80s movie. and they're like marveling about technology like fax machines, so it dates itself in that way. And Die Hard with a Vengeance, we kind of spoke to this. It feels more like a Tarantino world,
Yeah.
1990s kind of, the Die Hard spin on a 1990s movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And apart from the parkour, you wouldn't necessarily know this was 2007.
Correct. Right. This is also the first time that we see Bruce Willis as John McClane without hair.
Yeah, and I wasn't planning on getting this so early, but since, I think the audience knows that we love this movie, it can take a little bit of flack. This is a question for you,
Yeah.
and this is a question that always plays on my mind when I watch this particular movie. Is this still John McClane, or have we passed over into Bruce Willis human walnut? Like, is there enough of John McClane still in him? What do you think?
I do. I think.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of toes the line. I
Right.
can see why you're asking the question, but I do feel like John McClane's still there. And the thing that I think they do really well in this movie, that works to speak to that, is they call back to the original Die Hard, the problems one of the reasons Die Hard 2 doesn't completely work for me is that his character doesn't grow at all. At the end of Die Hard, he has to kind of confront his pig-headedness and his lack of kind of understanding about his wife and her career and that kind of thing, so that they can come together. In Die Hard 2, they are together, so there's nowhere for him to go in terms of his relationship. And the thing they do so great in this movie is they bring the daughter in.
Oh, yeah, it's an excellent move.
And so you have the recall of the name Gennaro as opposed to using the name McClane. And he's having the same exact problem he had with his wife, except it's with his daughter.
Yeah.
And that's what humanizes him in this movie. And that's why he stays John McClane for me.
Yeah, and I go both ways. I do remember thinking, is there enough of the kind of post-moonlighting Bruce Willis, which was so central? Like, it's getting harder to believe that this guy was cast as a romantic comedy lead in anything.
Right, yeah.
It's like, it's straining credit. If you told someone who had just seen this movie that this guy was like, Ted Danson for a few years, they'd be like, "You're insane. That couldn't be true."
Right.
But it's just a question I asked basically because I've got nothing bad to say about the movie, and also because I think it keys into the way that this movie's trying to play both the sequel and the reboot card.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That it's trying to be so cagey about what came before, and that this being so cagey about you not having to know anything about what happened to before, that it sometimes feels like it's a brand new character. But what is also great about the film is in the second half of the film, we get a couple of different scenes where, reading between the lines, we can see the through line to the other sequels and the original.
Yeah, I was going to just bring that up. There are some, and it's funny with sequels, they don't do this nearly enough, and certainly not well. We talked, when we did the Jaws series, we talked about how efficiently Jaws 3D refers to Jaws and Jaws 2.
Yeah.
The idea of remember that shark attack I told you about that happened where I lived? That's why my brother lives in Colorado. So you have like one line that sums it all up.
Yeah.
And when John McClane meets Matt Farrell and they have this huge kind of awesome set piece of a shootout where you meet the hamster bad guy, and you got guys on fences and he's flipping them, and
yeah,
I mean just all kinds of fantastic, really fun stuff. But right after that, there's this moment where Matt Farrell, who, of course, this is not, this is brand new for his character.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Can you believe this happened? Have you ever done something like that before?" And just really quietly, McClane says, yeah, I've had things happen like that before.
And that's the kind of level it remains to the film, and it's a really nice tone for it to keep. And what I really liked was that there's a scene about, I don't know, about 2/3 of the way through the movie, maybe earlier, where John McClane is kind of basically talking about, it's his I could have been a contender scene. It's his, like, I was for a brief period a big shot. And it's interesting how these sequels, one of the ways in which they are, like, they are kind of continuous, is that you sort of see the celebrity of John McClane kind of gradually erode through these sequels.
Right, the 15 minutes, the light bulb is dimming.
Well, like Die Hard 2, everyone knows who John McClane is,
Right.
and that, what him being there means.
Die Hard and with a
Die
Vengeance,
Hard
it's
3 kind of talks about, it's like, it's kind of fading a little bit.
that thing in L.A. Yeah.
Yeah, that thing, exactly, yeah. And in this one, he just says, nothing. You get nothing.
Right.
And I just think that's like, I don't know if they're paying attention to these things or it's a happy accident, but when you're watching them together like we are, it definitely seems like there's a kind of there's an underlying narrative of basically no one cares about John McClane anymore.
Right, including his own wife.
Which is probably, well, you know what, also the screenwriters are thinking. It's like, why are we bringing him back after 13 years? Like, what's his relevance? What can he do for us?
Right, and the answer to that, to me, seems to be, like, in his own line, he says, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
I'm the guy who's here, so I have to do it. So
Yeah.
we're just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about Live Free or Die Hard. It's hard to get these sequel names correct by the time you get to the end, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. This is, we're starting to get very lengthy titles.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a moment. Look, people, we're living in strange times. We know that, don't we? Of course we do. People don't even know what to do with themselves. We're getting stir crazy. Well, get outside and get yourself some great food, I say. You need to go to Slater's 50/50 in Point Loma's Liberty Station. It's time to treat yourself to booze, to beer, to burgers, and more. They have their full menu, people. Their full menu, I say. How many restaurants do you know that are doing that? Most places are doing a quarter of their menu, probably. Some might be doing a half. Maybe a few have got 3/4 of the menu. But Slater's 50/50 has their full menu, including their signature 50/50 patty. It's half ground beef. It's half ground bacon. It's 100% delicious. What more could you possibly ask? Worried about social distancing? Well, it is in place, people. Tables are separated, and the staff will always be seen wearing masks. You're out of excuses. Get off your keister and come on down to Liberty Station's own Slater's 50/50. Indoor dining available, outdoor dining available. Bring the family, bring your dog. Come enjoy the normal again. Good day to you. I said good day. And we're back. We're here talking about 2007's Live Free or Die Hard. We were just talking about, how John McClane is fitting into the 2007 world, how Bruce Willis is fitting as an actor. We seem to both agree that there's enough John McClane there. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie... So when I heard this movie was coming out, I actually was not excited.
Yeah, I agreed.
So, it had been 6 years. I heard it was going to be PG-13. There was just a lot of things where I thought, oh, they're going to shit the bed on this movie. And walking out of it, I was so delighted at what I saw. The PG-13 thing didn't bother me at all.
Right.
I thought they worked around it well. I mean, I still think it's, for 98% of this movie, I think it's the most successful sequel.
Mm-hmm.
What were your feelings about when you first heard it was coming out and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I had the same reaction of just, because conservatively, John McClane is in his 50s.
Uh-huh.
Do I want to see an action movie? Well, I guess I watch Bond movies, so What's the difference? But,
Roger Moore was getting a little bit towards the toe tag at the end of that series.
yeah, exactly. But I remember the circumstances of seeing it could not be more perfect. I was on a double date, and we got to the movie, we got to the movie theater and did something that I have only seen in sitcoms like The King of Queens happen.
Right.
Where I remember there was a new Harry Potter out, and there was Die Hard 4.0, Live Free or Die Hard to the American audiences. And the two guys decided to go to see Die Hard, and the two ladies went to see Harry Potter.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I mean that was the perfect viewing situation for this, and we just loved it. And interestingly, speaking of sequels, we tried to kind of recreate this formula with Crystal Skull, and with very different results. That way of watching it, like two guys who wanted a big gutso, action movie, actually hurt us when it got to Crystal Skull.
You couldn't recreate the magic?
We couldn't recreate the magic, but
did you have the same date?
I had it, but it was the same. It was definitely the same
guy
disparity that you had of like expectation versus reality. And I just remember, and I think this is kind of key for any Die Hard. I remember laughing a lot. I remember thinking so many things were successful, like scene by scene.
Yeah.
And in whatever reservations I had in 2007 about it, like 99% of them has been resolved in watching it a few times since. I've changed my mind on pretty much everything I didn't like about it the first time.
Okay. What were those initial reactions? What did you initially not like?
2 words, Kevin Smith.
Okay. All right.
Right. I remember at the time thinking, this didn't feel right. This didn't feel like it should be in there. This is an egregious cameo that's out of universe.
See, I remember thinking, that's how I should feel.
Yeah.
But I love him.
Well, that's what I feel about it now, and that's
Yeah.
one of the instances where the film has proved me wrong over the years, because that trope of the hacker who lives in his mother's basement, who's the only person who can hack into these very important places, is like commonplace now. And there wasn't too many of them before that. They're all those kind of characters are some variation of Kevin Smith's Warlock.
Right.
And they're kind of signaling a lot of things that they're vindicated in. That they're introducing this icon of nerd culture and saying, guys, this is going to be movies from now on. All that stuff that's up on his wall, we're going to reboot the shit out of that.
Yeah, you're going to be seeing a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These kind of people are going to be running the movie industry in the next few years. You can see all that, the nucleus of all that right there.
What's fascinating to me about Kevin Smith being in this movie is that, like you said, you think that it's just Kevin Smith, right? Like,
yeah.
And it has that feel, and yet when I watch it now, yes, it's Kevin Smith, but I feel the character.
Oh yeah,
it feels, he's completely playing the character to me, and just because the character's very much like him,
yes.
Like it doesn't bother me at all.
No, it's definitely, it doesn't bother me at all now. I think it was timely then, and it could have dated, but everything that has happened since just reaffirms that this is the kind of character that, if you're going to do a cyber thriller, this is one of the kinds of characters you have, and that's what this essentially is. And I think it's actually brilliant. I think it's actually, I look forward to seeing him.
It's like just the right amount of comedy. And I remember in my notes, I have a thing where I think he was trying to ham up the comedy when they first started shooting it.
Yeah.
And Bruce Willis actually encouraged him to take it down a notch. And to me, they clearly found the Goldilocks bowl for his humor and where he was going. I love the moment where he says, "Oh, you a big fan of the Fett?"
It's great, and
Now I'm kind of more of a Star Wars fan myself. I mean, I just love it.
I think it's a really, and one of the I was also struck again. This is like watching it back in 2020. I did wonder whether Kevin Smith really had a heart attack and lost all that weight, or he just saw a rerun of this where everyone is calling him fat for 20 minutes,
Right?
And it just shamed him into losing all that weight. Because I cannot believe how many times people comment on. I was like, he's really not that big. Okay, we're not talking about.
They're not nice.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating how and the stuff that's on his wall, Planet of the Apes, Star Wars, has all since become like major reboot properties, and I sort of wondered, whether they were sort of like trying to, in the same way Die Hard 2, we talked about how they're always talking about the fact that they're a sequel. That they also feel now the justification.
They reference it a lot.
Talk about it's like, hey, we're a franchise now. We're one of these big. We're one of these big hitters now. We're a Planet of the Apes. We're a Star Wars.
And that's one of the things that makes the first 3 sequels, 2, 3, 4, so hard to rank, because it's not great that Die Hard 2 is so self-aware of it being a sequel. So it feels less honest, but like from beginning to end, for what it is, it's so successful in what it does exactly what it wants to do. But 3 and 4 are successful in the way that we were referring to earlier about this sort of lived life, the actual lived life of John McClane, how his celebrity is waning.
And for someone who had real issues with how the previous movie wrapped up, I think straight out of the gate, that they go in exactly the direction I wanted them to go, where they basically decide that Holly and John never got back together.
Yeah, their relationship is over, right?
The best as it comes, and I'm sure Bonnie Bedelia's availability is probably still the major factor behind that. But nonetheless, I'm I absolutely like great. Now we're like we're in a dysfunctional family, and we're focusing on one of the kids grown up. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I remember thinking this the first time I saw it, but I remember thinking, if she was just in that early part of the movie, it'd be a real waste. So the fact that they make her part of the story later on is beautiful.
Another great choice. I agree. So, go ahead.
And she plays it really well, and I think we'll talk about this more when we talk about A Good Day to Die Hard. But it makes me realize that what value this franchise puts on the chemistry being right between not just the central double act, but also the central trio. Yeah. If you don't get that right, basically you don't have anything.
Correct.
In a Die Hard.
And that's kind of plainly evident in our next movie.
Matt and John, when it's actually the repartee improves when it's the three of them, which you really don't. I remember laughing in surprise in the theater when they have like a triple. It's like she starts talking like John McClane, and he says, He says, I've heard that, but I don't expect it from people with hair.
Right.
And I'm like, this movie's getting better when you throw in the daughter.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And so we haven't talked much about Justin Long and his character, Matt Farrell. Do you like that addition? I remember in the last episode you spoke to, as far as kind of the John McClane partner, you felt like this was the most successful. Is that right?
Definitely, yeah. I think because what they've taken the basic idea as of a split in the partnership between Brain and Brawn.
Correct.
They've taken that, which has carried the last two Die Hards at least. But they've added in that he's he's tech minded and that he's young, which adds this kind of intergenerational element to
conflict.
It. And some of the great joys of the movies are their kind of mutual misunderstandings of. There's a great scene where they're driving to Washington.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, he's trying to trying to talk to him about Creedence, which is on the radio, and and Matt's describing it as classic rock, and he doesn't understand that it's classic. And then they talk about the news and how the younger generations thinks the news is fake, and he relies on it for information. And like even in that short scene, they've completely justified moving to a younger character, who is kind of reminiscent of these past kind of partners that John McClane's had, but it adds a totally different dimension to it.
Yeah, I think it's really successful how they're paired off, and because he's the computer geek and because he's young, you automatically have kind of conflict. And I love these small moments, because there's a moment after they're at Freddy's where he even says, you should cut bait and run, like you should just go. And he gets in the car, and there's that moment where he says, 'cause you're that guy. So, it's funny that what John McClane as a character seems to value, this guy's becoming.
Yeah.
So he's, it's like he's stepping a toe into the brawn while still using his brains.
Completely, yeah, and it's interesting that they've never kind of played the cowardice card with the partner before,
Right?
Like because Zeus was, and this was a political choice as well. He was right there with McClane from the beginning. He grabs his gun and points it at the guys who are trying to hurt McClane,
Right.
who are like his people. Like he's in it
from his neighborhood,
from the get-go. Right? And people like Barnes. He's obviously he's out of his depth in the action, but he's not scared.
Right.
But Matt is, he's scared and hungry, and those are two things that we haven't addressed in this franchise before.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, sort of moving on. There are little things throughout the series. I don't know if they are actually scripted, or at least the first one if it's scripted, or if it's just like what Bruce Willis is doing.
Yeah.
But one thing I've always loved about John McClane is how much he talks to himself.
Absolutely, and there's just the right amount of that here. And it comes in just at that moment where you're like, is this still John McClane?
Right.
And then he talks to himself in a car, and you're like, yeah, it's still.
Yeah,
it's still
yeah. I mean, those little moments are just fantastic to me. And then this is a little thing, because you don't see this in a lot of action movies. Usually the guns are filled with endless bullets.
Yes.
And the one thing they do in this series throughout is he runs out of bullets.
Yeah.
And whenever he has to reload his gun, you have the mix of genuine panic, I'm about to die, I need to hurry, but being steady enough to get it done. And I love that about his performance. To me it speaks to actually being a police officer. It makes me believe him.
100%, yeah. And they also, there's something about at least the first half of the movie that feels very kind of homemade. Is using a fire extinguisher to defend themselves rather than
Right.
shooting someone, or shooting a fire extinguisher to kill someone. And I guess that's sort of why. I don't know how you feel about that. I can take an educated guess. But when we get to the fighter jet sequence.
Well, hang on. Let's wait for a second.
Okay.
That's a big thing to talk about. What I was going to say, though, just in reference to what you're saying, I think it speaks to the character's intelligence. Now, you have to pause it and be watching it at home to find this out, but there's the moment where Gabriel kind of brings up McClane's police file. And if you pause it, you see moments of his sergeant's test, his detective test, his lieutenant's test. Mm-hmm. And he's always, in the 92, 94, 93 percentile.
Interesting.
And so it speaks to his intelligence. Now, what you're talking about is more the big set pieces. So
so on that, when it's a really important point in the movie when Gabriel hacks into his file, and this is the moment in the movie where you assume they're going to talk about Nagasaki, Dallas,
right.
New York. They make no mention of that. They talk about family stuff, which is, canon, but it's fairly superficial. And then later on in the movie, Gabriel makes a comment where he says, "You're always in the wrong place at the wrong time." So the choice that the movie's making, as I understand it, I mean, it could be viewed differently, is that whatever he's found out about John McClane does include this. He does
what's
know,
interesting
but
is
the filmmakers don't want to talk about it.
Gabriel doesn't speak to it, but on that same shot that I was talking about, it talks about the medals he earns for those moments for the Nakatomi Towers.
But it's just amazing to me that he wouldn't bring that up.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't be like, "Oh shit, we're dealing with the guy who was involved in these who thwarted these 3 major terrorist acts. Okay, we should probably reconsider our strategy." But then I love that and this is, it's trying to play both sides, where it's like the audience, if they haven't seen the previous sequels from 20 years ago or whatever, they're not gonna be invested in it in the same way that people coming back to it are.
That's true.
But you need that line at the end, always in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, it's like, oh, so we know Gabriel knows that he's dealing with that he knows who he's dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so all right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna finish up, Live Free or Die Hard. You'll notice, listeners, the quibbles we're talking about, they're minor. We love this movie. Tell us what you think. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had 1, maybe 2 craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back. We're here talking about Live Free or Die Hard. We're coming to the end, Tom. Let's talk about the end of this movie, or just in general, because you've referenced it a couple of times. The one thing that clearly defines this movie as a 2000s movie to me is it's filled with set pieces.
Yes.
And so we seem to try to be getting from set piece to set piece to set piece. But the one thing that's great about this movie is the set pieces are awesome. And what's in between is always good. So when you're going from the first shootout to the tunnel shootout, or, killing a helicopter with a car, to,
He ran out of bullets, Mike. He ran out of bullets.
What else could you do? So let me ask you, we get to the final set piece, which to me is like the moment this movie goes to 11 in the best way.
I don't know if it is in the best way. So you referenced it before. I don't enjoy it as much as you might expect.
The fighter jet?
Yeah, this is actually something that has bothered me more rewatching it than it did at the time. I think, again, the original context is 2 guys separated from their girlfriends, not having to watch a Harry Potter movie. You're going to be excited about that fighter jet, right?
Well, so...
But now, to give you a kind of glimpse, and this is partly a product of like watching 2 and 3 before this. To me now it just seems totally about upping the ante. What haven't we done? And I think sequels get into a very bad they go down a very bad road when they start to think like that. And I think this is an example of that, where it's just about, okay, so in Die Hard 2, he was on the wing, but the plane never left the ground. So let's do the plane in the air, but him jumping to the ground.
See, so I think you're completely right about that. Like, to me, it's absolutely absurd what happens in this sequence. And yet, through the direction that, that Len Weissman gives, it's completely believable to me.
Okay. No,
Like,
I mean...
by the end of it, I realized that I've been holding my breath.
Uh-huh.
When he's jumping off that airplane in between two slabs of freeway concrete with the explosion going behind him, every single time I'm going, fuck yeah.
But, I think and as well, I think the film is a victim of its own success here. It's like, I understand that you want to do these overblown big things, but the film is so good at just getting away with being a little bit short of that. Like the fire extinguisher is ridiculous, but there's this kind of homemade improvisatory quality about it.
Right. But I think there are choices in that too. Like I think the reason it works is because it's not an explosion when he hits the fire extinguisher with fire. It's just the gas releasing, and there's enough gas to push the guy out the window. It's like they make it slightly implausible, but like just possible enough to make you believe it.
There's a famous scene from The Office, the American Office, where Michael Scott, moonlighting in a call center, is giving his review of Live Free or Die Hard, and he's basically saying that it started off with this this guy that you could believe in, and now he's jumping off the wings of jets and using a helicopter as a weapon, the fighter jet sequence is the only moment where I could give credence, excuse the pun, give credence to that argument that we've come too far in the way of, we've lost the heart and soul of, he is just like a digital figure in a big cartoon at that point. That's the only moment I feel like that in the whole film. The rest of it, I'm like, you just, you go, girl.
I
but
feel more
this
like
moment,
that
I'm like,
in the
no,
elevator
please don't
sequence.
jump off that wing. At least stay on the wing and let it land, or something that they did in Die Hard 2, because they were like, oh, no one's gonna believe he could jump from the air to the ground.
Oh, it's completely plausible to me that he can go between those slabs of concrete. He's just sliding, Tom. He's just sliding.
Just sliding.
It's just a big slide.
He is in his 50s.
Yeah,
He's
less
pushing
believable.
retirement. Again, but that's the thing. It's like, what is the world of this franchise? Like, how far does it go into that James Bond territory of, conservative sci-fi?
Right. Well, see, and I keep saying, like, the place where I feel the most like that is actually the elevator sequence.
Yeah.
Now, not the elevator sequence itself, because, like, you have this great fight. By the way, Maggie Q, we haven't mentioned Maggie Q, great villain in this movie.
Yeah, and
She's
the
beating
Die
the
Hard
tar
record
out
on
of
diversity continues, but they're kind of like mixing it up with Antipodean and Southeast Asian Americans as well. It's great to see.
And she's just fantastic as a baddie in this movie. She's beaten the snot out of John McClane. You have this interesting moment where he decides, you know what? I don't care that this is a woman, and just starts throwing her through glass, But then she beats the snot out of him, and he falls down 3 flights of stairs or something like that. Anyway, he gets to a car and rams the whole thing through the building. And when he hits her, it's not like how somebody gets hit by a car and she's flown. It's more she just sticks to the windshield. And then the next thing you know, he decides to ram it into an elevator shaft. Pretty unsafe.
Yeah.
So all of that felt kind of dumb to me. But once they get in the elevator shaft, then you have another great set piece. So,
and
I forgive it.
They have a lot of great one-liners to offset everything absurd that they do, which is what this franchise is great at. And spoiler alert, what the next movie is not good at.
Right. Well, so now we've got just a couple of minutes left. We come to the place. Do you feel as I do? Because the only thing that lacks for me in this movie is like the last 5 minutes.
Oh no,
It feels like an unsatisfying end.
Oh no! I disagree. I completely disagree. I love the fighter jet stands out to me as like, it's a jump the shark, or if, to use our terminology, skiing off the skyscraper moment for me.
Uh-huh.
But after that, I love that. I love that kind of low key. There's the suggestion of a romance between Matt and Lucy.
No, yeah, I like all of that.
And then he says, "Find yourself a man, not that one," and it's great. It's like,
right.
Oh, great, we're not going down that road. Perfect.
No, all of that is great, and I'm even misspeaking a little bit because it's not that I don't like what's there. It's that in comparison to the other, the original and the other two sequels, it just feels like there's not a lot of bang for your buck.
It's not kind of got that triumphalist feeling that Die Hard 2 definitely
Right.
has.
That's what feels like it's missing. But everything that is there, I do like. It just doesn't feel triumphant. I think you hit the nail on the head.
I like that choice. I think it's
Okay.
Again, it's like, I think if 3 had have just had like a nice, like had ended at that point before they go to Canada where they're kind of defeated and dejected.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like they're doing that with the tone. I mean, they win, but it's like, family is the thing.
Right. It's just a little messy for me in the sense of, he's got the gun pointed into a wound in McClane's right shoulder. He's standing right behind him. He pulls the trigger, and yet somehow Gabriel is shot right in the heart on the left side of his body. So, there's just there's little things that, and again, I'm quibbling. But within the scene, there's lots of fun stuff. I think this is the moment where Timothy Olyphant is like at his most fun.
Definitely.
His henchman gets shot in the foot, and he's like, Jesus.
He's got this great
You got
line
her?
in mock incredulity
You
at
sure?
his henchman. That's really, really good.
Oh, it's so good. He shoots at Matt, because he wants him to try to get the, revert the computer nonsense he's done. And all of those moments are great. And like you said earlier, you're the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And all of that's really good. But I don't know. I guess I just want a little more.
Well, I think it's good that it left you wanting more, because when the third film, when Die Hard with a Vengeance felt that way, they gave you Gare du Nord.
Right. Well, I think we've come to the end. We know that this is my favorite of the 4 sequels. This is your second favorite. Ladies and gentlemen, find us. We're on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on the Instagram. Tell us what you think of Live Free or Die Hard. You can email us too at everythingsequelpodcast@gmail.com. We want to know what you think. So give us a shout out. Tom, anything else to say before we go?
No, it's a good day to talk about. It's a good day to die hard. It's not called It's a Good Day to Die Hard, is it? It's called A Good Day to Die Hard.
Right. A Good Day to Die Hard. That's coming up next. We're going to be completing this series. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.